regarding transportation. And the new Open Meetings Act requirements, Mr. Green knows the first part. It does require, I think, each person to identify where they're participating from. And that would be just the city and county. You have to specify both. And then I was told this morning, I don't know if you've received anything pertaining to this, Mr. Green, but also that there needs to be, everything needs to have a roll call vote.
The way we've played it via the roll call vote, it's more specific action items need the roll call. So me and Katrina talked about this. When you guys vote to approve minutes in the agenda,
yeah,
we don't need roll call vote, but we'd say
for something more substantive, they recommend a roll call vote.
Yeah. So for example, for today's meeting, the only one I would recommend a roll call vote is if you take any action regarding the public hearing.
Okay. But you're in agreement about we do need to specify where we're participating.
Correct. Yep. And it's just voting members of the body. So staff and consultants and visitors, no.
Should we do that at the beginning before we get started, Mr. Green?
Yeah, it would just be during normal roll call. Yep.
Okay. Sorry about that. It's all you, Katrina and Chairman Fosdick.
Thank you, Brian. Welcome everybody to the November 18th, 2020 City of Saline Planning Commission meeting. Katrina, would you want to do the roll call, and then what else do you need? Just an address where they're from, or from the city?
Yes, city and county.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we don't need your specific address. So for me, it'd be Saline, Washtenaw County.
All right. So Chairman Fosdick is from Saline, Washtenaw County. Katrina, you want to take it from there, or Mike?
I can. Vice Chair Huff.
Saline, Washtenaw County.
Secretary Treasurer Carroll.
Saline, Washtenaw County, here.
Mayor Morrow.
City Hall, Saline, Washtenaw County.
Councilmember Gearbaugh.
Saline, Washtenaw County.
Staff Rep.
I couldn't hear you. Did you call me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Milan, Washtenaw County.
And Commissioner Beardsley.
Saline, Washtenaw County.
Commissioner Troika.
City of Saline, Washtenaw County.
And Commissioner Young.
Saline, Washtenaw County.
Okay, thanks everybody. We'll start out with, there is a motion to approve the agenda. I believe there's a few discussion items we want to add to them. Brian, do you want to tell us about those?
I think it was Mr. Beardsley wanted to mention the forthcoming medical marijuana ordinances, and I think he also wanted to ask a couple of questions pertaining to surety bonds or lines of credit, additional tools to prevent failed or stalled projects.
All said, sir.
So
We will add to it. Go ahead.
I said we got an amended agenda with next year's meeting dates, so I think we need to reference that as well.
Okay, so what we're going to do is approve the amended agenda that's been sent out.
And we also got we got something that was identified as item 2020 involving Saline Area Social Service, which is not on the agenda. Is that going to be discussed or not?
It's a presentation, Dan.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, Ms. Heff, would you move that motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
And Dan Carroll, would you second that?
Second.
All those in favor, state by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, say nay. The ayes have it. Okay, there's a motion to approve the meeting minutes for October 14th. Mayor Morrow, will you move that? And second by Dean Gearbaugh?
Yes, I'll move.
Okay,
And second.
okay, all those in favor, state by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, say no, nay. Okay, the ayes have it. All right, citizen comments under the Open Meetings Act. Any citizen may come forward at this time and make comments under reasonable limits, which may be established by this public body. The person is requested but not required to state their name and address for the record. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Katrina and Mike, is there anybody out there that would like to say something?
I would.
Okay.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, this is Gary Roble,
Okay.
former staff liaison to the Planning Commission.
Who?
Hi, Gary.
Go ahead.
Hello, Gary.
Gary Roble.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Yes, I'd like to speak on behalf of item 20-21.
Okay.
I'm very familiar with that parcel. Many developers have tried in the past to get to this point, although they didn't get that far through the owner, I don't believe. But I'm very familiar with the site, so I can be helpful to both Danny Very and to the commission and at future meetings. I just wanted to voice my support for the conditional zoning amendment because and I do agree much with Dean Gearbaugh. He hit the nail on the head. We discussed the possible upzoning of the Maple Road corridor for many renditions of the 5-year updates to the master plan. And so it's been done individually, hodgepodge. So I would support the conditional zoning for this parcel of land, but I would encourage the Planning Commission to look at that whole corridor when you do your next master plan update and do some serious planning on that.
Great. Thank you, Gary.
You're welcome.
Mike or Katrina, any other comments out there, do you think?
I have received no written comment.
Okay, very good. All right. We have a presentation from the Saline Social Services Conceptual Site Plan. So I'm going to let them have the floor. So have at it.
Right, great. Hi, everyone. I'm Ann Cummings. I'm the Executive Director at Saline Area Social Service. I am joined tonight by Roger Mike Graham, who is our President of the Board of Directors for Saline Area Social Service, as well as Gary Roble, who has been an acting advisor to our facilities board committee throughout this entire process as well. Thank you for allowing us to present to you tonight. The plan that we'll be presenting tonight was prepared by Vanston O'Brien. The plans have all been reviewed and approved by our SAS facilities committee, board committee, as well as our board of directors. Before we get started and talking through the conceptual site plan, I just want to give you just brief highlights of who we are, our impact within the community, and kind of what's led us down the path of this presentation today. I have included a number of materials today. I won't go through everything. It's pretty exhaustive. So, but there is additional detail within the presentation if you would like additional information as well. So, service has been in the community for nearly 60 years. And through these years, it's been our mission to provide assistance and emergency assistance and food to those in need within our community. The landscape right now, or at least pre-COVID, as far as we could get statistics, there are at least 1,000 families living in the Saline area that are living below poverty, and 650 students that qualify for free or reduced lunch. We serve approximately 300 every week. Of those 300, near a little over 40% are children. Within the adults that we serve, nearly 20% are seniors, and over 40% are women. It's beyond food. It's clearly one of our main priorities within the community, and ensuring that nobody goes hungry within our community that needs that support. We've been fortunate over the last number of years to expand that. So beyond food, we provide a number of different emergency resources. So whether that's utility assistance, emergency car repair, prescription copays, the list goes on and on. For students, we help support student efforts with not only student scholarships for after-school activities, but we've now also expanded it to tutoring and mental health programs as well. So as we've grown throughout the years, we've because of the unwavering support that we've received from the community, we've been able to basically expand our programs as well. Now with COVID that's happened this year, it's clearly affected us like it has throughout the rest of the community. For us, clearly community needs have grown, safety standards have increased, and that's currently exacerbated a number of the limitations that we had on the facility even prior to COVID as well. And so at this point, we've been, over the last number of months, we've been accommodating for client growth, which has increased. Our base increase has been over 30% since March. We've needed to reinvent our operations as many businesses and organizations have had to do within the community. Number of times over. One of the biggest areas that have grown tremendously is the amount of deliveries that we provide on a weekly basis. That has grown by 375% since March. Has become now one of the big components of what we do. We've also needed to secure new volunteers. Before COVID, our primary volunteer base was those, majority were those that were highly at risk, nearly 80%. And so we needed to start from scratch really quickly. And not only do that, but with the new procedures and operations that we had in place, we've needed to grow our volunteer base even more so. And thankfully, with the support, we've been able to do that. And with that said, our volunteer needs have increased by 40% as well. And then ultimately, it's been a challenge to keep our pantry full. Our needs are grown with additional people coming in. We've had to give out more food, but with that said, the community support has also brought in more food as well. And so it's for us, it's having that transition space that is able to not only supply large amounts of food, but also be able to distribute it widely as well. So ultimately, our biggest need at this point that as we've been going through this process, we've been relying heavily on the community in different aspects and been fortunate enough to do so, but realizing that this problem is not going to go away. We have grown, we are continuing to grow, our programs are strengthening, and with that said, we're really looking to have a space that really focuses on 3 different key areas. And one is being able to accommodate this greater need, not only again for the people coming in, but the growth of the programs that we've been offering. And so with that said, we wanted to ensure that we have ample storage, not only for our warehouse space, but also for cooler storage and freezer space as well. We want to make sure that we continue to offer abide by the new safety compliance standards. At this point, we can no longer allow our clients to come inside the building to shop. We have converted to a curbside distribution model. And with that, it has its bonuses that we're able to continue to provide them food, but there are lost components about that as well. There are a lot of personal connections with our staff where we learn about more needs that our clients have are unfortunately now lost. And so we hope to regain that, as well as giving the clients the independence back to be able to shop freely and choose food within our pantry. And then ultimately, our goal is to have increased flexibility. So not only for increased emergency needs like we're in today, but also even prior to COVID, we've been known for flexibility. So whether we have to prepare for huge community-wide food drives with ample storage, big client program distributions like our holiday distribution programs, both with food and adopt a family, just being able to expand and be nimble and grow in different places. Whereas now we're kind of on top of each other, trying to find little nooks and crannies to keep our food and products intact, and just kind of managing in that respect. So with that, we can move forward and talk a little bit about just our preliminary or conceptual site plan. So where we have netted out is within this space, we are proposing a 2-story expansion off of the north side of our existing building. It will allow for ground floor access both to our warehouse and pantry, which is something that doesn't exist at this point. The size of the space at this point, and again, we're still working out the nooks or the kinks, but at this point, we're estimating a combined space increase for both storage and pantry space, nearly 3 times of what we have at this point. This would allow us to have safe social distancing within our pantry for all of our clients as well as our volunteers. Within this, we also took special precautions to try to maintain the improvements that we invested in 2017, both with some of the asphalt parking that we've added, as well as the storm water infiltration systems and landscaping that we installed both on the southwest and southeast side of the building. The parking, as you'll see, we've needed to, we're recommending removing existing garages that are on the north side of our lot currently. And this would allow space to have a larger turnaround within our parking lot, which is another feature that we do not have at the moment. And then also from a parking perspective, the number of spaces Gary has also been very helpful, as well as Vanston O'Brien, as far as trying to do our due diligence and ensuring that we have the ample parking for the facility that we have for the growth that we're recommending. And in addition to that, you'll see on the northeast side of the expansion, there is a canopy. And this will also help us to allow for this increased flexibility. So not only do we get clobbered with the western winds quite often throughout the year, this will allow us to have a somewhat protected entry into our pantry. It will also help with unloading and loading, which occurs almost every day throughout the weekdays. It will also allow us the flexibility if there ever becomes a time when we're no longer allowed to have clients back in the pantry, so that we can have an easy access point for distribution. Before I go any further, are there any questions? All right. Okay, so if you move on to the next page, this is early concept of just giving you a visual of just preliminary thoughts of how we envision this space looking. Clearly, we want to enhance and complement our existing building without detracting from the space, knowing our location and visibility. Want to also clearly knowing that this is very early stages. It will highly evolve from probably when we present our initial and our preliminary and final site plan presentations. But this is, again, just to give you just one snapshot of how we see this, how we envision this space working as part of that expansion. And then ultimately, if you move to the next slide, this is just truly an inspirational visual to help you understand. We're starting to have discussions around exterior finishes. At this point, this is by no means what we anticipate the final look to be, as far as this is again, from a materials element standpoint. We're going off of the inspiration of a contemporary farmhouse, which the appeal of the vertical siding, the board and bat vertical siding, is very appealing to our board as well. And as you can see in the picture, it's also complementary to the horizontal siding of the existing house. And so we're hoping to achieve somewhat of a similar feel. One just caveat to note is that within the facility, as you see in the elevations, the roof line in the new structure will is what we're estimating is approximately going to be 1 foot higher than our existing building to date. So I'll open it up to any questions or concerns or comments.
I have one. It's unusual for an applicant to come before this body and talk about a concept, and I commend you for doing that because I think it enhances everyone's appreciation for what you're trying to accomplish, and more engagement with stakeholders is going to be really helpful to you. So, but I guess I would say, what do you want out of this evening from us? What's your definition of success tonight?
Absolutely. I think for us is clearly we want to be prepared, right? I think knowing that the holidays are coming, wanting to, we're a nonprofit, wanting to maximize the time that we have once we solidify on a builder and having those plans in place. We want to be prepared and eliminate any hurdles that may unravel, down the road. And I think if there are any, as we're still in the early phases and there are a number of different, adjustments that can be made, I think if there are any huge red flags for us to be aware of, again, this is not something that we have ever done before as an organization. I think so for us, we want to make sure that just understand and hear any feedback that you have as the commission, any big concerns that we would have, so that we can then go back as we continue to develop these plans and hopefully address them before the preliminary site plan presentation.
Thank you.
This is Roger Ram. We're looking to do this fairly quickly, so we're looking to smooth out any problems we might have. We're going to be starting a capital campaign, so we'd like to get the plans done and know our goal for our capital campaign going forward.
Roger, Ann, if I may, overall, I think the material that you provided looks good. I'm eager, and I would encourage you to move expeditiously to provide all the necessary paperwork for staff so we can get the ball rolling on the planning and zoning process. And I want to commend you and your board and all of your volunteers. I think it's important to take a moment and reflect where this organization was 6 years ago when I became mayor. At that point, the group was struggling to find a home. And look at the tremendous progress you've made as an entity over the past 5, 6, 7 years. It's really extraordinary. And so I commend you for that. There is tremendous need in the community, and I know that this additional structure will be beneficial to you. So again, overall, this looks good, and I look forward to considering this as an action item at an upcoming Planning Commission meeting. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have one more question, and that is because what they want out of tonight is any kind of direction we can give them to help reshape their plan. Let me ask Mike or Ann, in your preliminary planning, have you identified anything that would need some sort of exception treatment from us or the zoning board of appeals? And if so, what would that be?
At this point, and Gary, please feel free to step in as well. Right now, there is, we're still in the process and we're not presenting it tonight, but as far as we're looking at layouts, both for internal and external, I think one waiver that we will need to achieve most likely will be an elevator waiver. And so we're in the process of understanding and exactly how best to do that as well, and what that second floor truly entails.
Yeah, this is Gary here.
Go ahead.
Yes, just to respond to Bill's zoning and planning questions. I work closely with Vance and O'Brien in the committee, and I, of course, offered up a few years of experience in reviewing these site plans myself, and I have a copy of the code book. I went through the form-based code, the parking code, the landscape ordinance, and so what we have done is a sort of a pre-review, and just to make sure that we did not have to be faced with any of the things that Bill was concerned with as far as waivers and exceptions and variances. And I think we can easily meet those intent and purpose sections of the form-based code and zoning and planning ordinances. And so we'll keep Vance and O'Brien on track, going in the right direction as I'll be reviewing the combined preliminary final site plan as it's being developed.
Great.
Okay, any other questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
it's Cheryl. Hi, Ann. And Ann's already heard part of this from me. I commend Saline Social Services for all they've done. And as Brian says, in the last 6 years, has grown. They're in a house in essence. But I consider it the gateway to a great degree into Saline, with the cemetery on one side and the home on the other. And just want to keep in mind as you go forward, that the appearance of this lot is super important. And I just think that we need to look at reality and to how this is to appear. And I had not seen, the conceptual plan here. I'd seen the layout plan, but I'd not seen the conceptual plan. And we just need to keep in mind that it's an addition to a house and how that will look.
Absolutely. Thank you, Cheryl.
Mike, can you give me a little update on the type of zoning that's there, and considering that some of it either backs up to professional development or residential? And if Gary's looked at it, I'm assuming that those things have been met, but I wasn't sure what exactly this is in terms of its zoning.
I would have to double check to see if it has any special uses, but the zoning for that lot is D2. So what's that? Downtown Edge is what it's technically called. But yeah, when we looked at this conceptual plan probably a couple weeks back, it does look like it currently meets everything.
Including the impervious surface and all of that for the parking lot?
As of right now, it looks like it. And that's something we've talked about with Ann to make sure drainage is good when they get the final combined plans ready to go. So we'll take a good look at that when it comes to fruition.
And I can't recall, I don't know if this side of Michigan Avenue or this side of Ann Arbor Street requires any kind of historical aspect because of the age of the houses. I do know it's required east of Saline Ann Arbor Road, but my suggestion would be to actually also share this plan with the Historic District Commission, just to get input, especially since, as Cheryl mentioned, there's a concern with how this will appear when we, look at it as our overall approach into the city.
Absolutely, yeah, and I can definitely do that. And that's one of the reasons we asked Ann to include that conceptual picture, just so you guys have a general idea of what they're thinking about.
Right. I mean, one of the things is, I know when you're looking at a historical home or even this type of situation, the new addition should be something that isn't necessarily a twin of what's already existing there. But however, the building could be to accommodate what would look like when this property would have been built back in the time. I think that should be actually one of the attributes, especially when you're looking at materials and other things that are on the outside of the building.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions or concerns? Am I coming through?
Whoops, just one. I do have one concern. I am concerned about a waiver for an elevator. I wouldn't like to set that kind of precedent. So I think that really seriously has to be investigated in terms of, we required that uptown in all our building rehabs and all the other aspects, and to grant that at this point has me a little leery. So just to make that quite clear.
Absolutely.
Okay. Very good. Any more questions?
It does not appear so, sir.
All right, very good. Well, thank you very much for your time, and we'll look forward to the plan.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I appreciate all your
Yep,
help.
we appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to the next bit of business, which is 2021, an application from Danny Veery of Blake Anthony Homes, Inc. for a conditional zoning amendment to change the zoning of 2 parcels totaling 6 acres from I-2 industrial to R3 multifamily residential at 7181 North Maple Road, Saline, Michigan. Parcel numbers 1812, 31, 210, 015, and 1812, 31, 210, 019. Chris, do you want to give us summarize your report from last time?
Yeah, he wants to, I don't know how many units are, he did submit a conceptual plan, just a real quick glance. There may be a couple of issues in there, but that's something that can be addressed at the time of site plan. As far as the conditional rezoning, as the mayor had expressed at the last meeting when we discussed this, conditional rezoning is permitted by the state law, the Zoning Enabling Act. And what that allows is for the applicant to suggest stipulations and conditions to the Planning Commission in exchange for allowing this to be rezoned, in this case to R3 multiple family. Now, what his stipulation, he did offer up a few conditions, but the one condition is that if this doesn't come to fruition within 5 years, that it will revert back to the current zoning designation right now, which is the industrial. There were a couple of other options that he put in there, but those were for variances. It might have just been a bit of confusion with like a PUD or site condo development. But at this point, the Planning Commission doesn't have any authority to issue any waivers or exemptions or even variance for that matter for the site plan aspect of it. So this is strictly for the conditional rezoning from industrial, general industrial to R3 with the condition as presented by the applicant for it to revert back to I2 if after 5 years the development has not commenced. Now, and just to kind of a quick summary or overview of the conditional rezoning, the Planning Commission is not permitted to add any conditions to this or suggest any conditions to the applicant. So what it is at this point is the Planning Commission has to base their decision on the facts presented as it relates to the future land use map, to the master plan, and to the condition that has been presented by the applicant. But the Planning Commission is not allowed to suggest any further conditions.
Okay. All right, thank you, Chris. All right, there is a motion to acknowledge the receipt of the report dated November 4th, 2020 from City Planner Atkin. Chief Hart, would you move that? And Bill, would you second that?
Yes.
And yes, I will second that motion.
All right, discussion. Any questions for Chris at this point?
So I had one question. In our last discussion of this matter, I think it was commented that R3A has a lower density, like 10 two-bedroom units per acre, and that R3 has 14. And I thought at the time it was said that this would actually be an R3A. Is there any reason why we're proposing R3 if the actual proposed use would meet R3A?
I believe that's what the applicant had applied for, was the R3. I can go back and check, but you're correct. Your initial comment was the difference between the two is density. Let me pull up the application here real quick.
Yeah, the actual proposal is R3 conditional, yes, on the applicant, Chris.
Okay.
Or on the application, yes.
Okay, I don't. And at the October meeting, it was R3 then also.
Yeah.
So.
Right, but we did discuss it in 3A. We discussed that maybe 3A would be appropriate because we shouldn't need to overzone it.
What is the density on 3A?
In 3A, you can do 10 two-bedrooms per acre.
I'm sorry, you broke up, Mr. Troika. What was that?
I believe it's 10 two-bedroom units per acre.
Oh, okay, that's more than enough. Either way, I think the zoning for both of them would work either way, so it doesn't matter to me. This is Danny, by the way.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, if there's no more questions for Chris, there is a motion. All those in favor, state by saying aye to accept the report.
Aye.
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 Those opposed? The ayes have it. Okay, now we'll move to the public hearing. Commissioner Troika, would you move to open the public hearing, and Ms. Young, would you second that motion?
Actually, Mr. Chairman, we have to hear from the developer first. He has 10 minutes to speak if he wants it.
Oh, I apologize. Yes, I apologize. Danny, if you're there, yeah, please. If you have any more comments, please.
You know, I think I pretty much said everything at the last meeting. So really, I'm okay with what you have in front of you and what you heard from me last time. That if you want to proceed with your questions, I'm ready to answer anything you might have.
Anybody have any questions for the developer? Okay, thank you, Danny.
You're welcome.
There is a motion to open the public meeting. Dan, would you move that, and Ms. Young, would you second that?
Move to open the public hearing.
Second.
Okay. Mike, Katrina, any comments out there you know of?
We need to call a vote on that.
Oh, I apologize. All those in favor state by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it.
And then no, sir, I've not received any written public comment.
All right, thank you. There's a motion to close the public hearing. Ms. Young, would you move that? And Dan, would you second that?
I move to close the public hearing.
And Mr. Troika, would you second that? All right, thank you. All right. Comments, questions from planning commission members?
Yeah, we also need to call a vote on that.
I apologize again.
That's all right.
All those in favor state by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no or nay. Ayes have it. Okay. Any questions out there from the planning commission members? Concerns, anything?
I'd start, Mr. Chair, and just remind everybody, not that you probably need it, what Mr. Berry intends to do on this property is really not germane to what we're considering here. The only matter that we are supposed to be looking at is, do we think this property is appropriate for multifamily residential? Because even though I think in good faith, Mr. Berry is here and certainly has proven that in the past, we take the risk of course, rezoning it. And then, you know, if something happens to Mr. Berry, somebody else could buy this and, you know, use the fullest extent of the zoning to do what they want that would be compliant with the site plan. So that's the real question is this an appropriate site for multifamily? I voiced my concern last time, you know, for two reasons. One is losing industrial base. And, you know, anytime we have an existing zoning and we're asked to change it, we really need to be, in my opinion, I need to look at that new use and say, wow, you know, that makes a lot of sense. And in this case, not only is it a change in zoning, but it's also a change against the future land use map. And while I recognize the site has some issues in terms of development and historically pretty difficult to develop, I just don't see that as a compelling reason to put multifamily in between those two offices. And if we did take a more comprehensive look at Maple Road, as Gary had suggested, you know, maybe it fits a little better in my mind, but this just doesn't feel like it fits in today's world, and in my opinion.
Bill, I just want to clarify, make sure that I'm understanding what you said, or a statement that you made. This conditional rezoning will be only for multifamily. If in the event in that 5 years it changes hands, it's still, it's kind of like a conditional, I guess, a conditional use or even a variance that stays with the property. It doesn't open it up to the entire permitted or special land uses as allowed in the R3 zoning. Just that one. That's the part of the condition as well.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I if I misspoke, I meant to say that you can use, you know, everything under that multifamily zoning in order to do whatever project, propose whatever project you want to do.
No,
obviously,
this would be strictly for what he is presenting.
Mm-hmm. How would we have enough information now to base that?
It'd be the only development that could happen would be multifamily residential, which is
Correct.
Permitted in that. Anything else that is permitted in that zoning district would not be allowed. So it's either as multifamily or nothing, as that use,
Okay.
not the zoning district.
Thank you. But if Mr. Berry decided he didn't want to be in business anymore, somebody else could come in, they could propose the maximum density allowed in multifamily zoning as opposed to the 30-some units that Mr. Berry's proposing.
Yeah, I mean, if they could meet the, well, let me see. I think he was specific in his condition as to how many units he could put in. If I'm not, let me go back and find the review.
But if we limit it to the 3A,
Well, here's what I put in there, 33 to 37 as a number. And I didn't spend a lot of time or energy or money into looking at that retention pond and what we would have to do. I mean, I know what the city has asked or informed me of what we would have to do, but I don't know what that will actually, how much space that would take if we combine the stormwater detention together. So even though the drawing has 33 in here, it might change a few units if we can use some of the land on the south side of the road in creating a detention pond for all the properties. But I don't know that yet because I haven't gone there. So that's why I put a range on there. You know, I think just as a developer in the years that I've been doing it, I might be able to get a building or so on the south side and work around that area for the detention for the whole thing. It might not make financial sense for me to say I'm going to encounter another $200,000 in infrastructure to get another 5 units. So I might not do it and keep it the way it is. So if we could have that flexibility, and I didn't know, Chris, to be honest with you, I didn't know how extensive or detailed, I should say, this would have to be for the conditional rezoning. So that's kind of why I threw that in there, giving it a range of 33 to, I said 37, but I'm going to say maybe 33 to 40, just because I haven't done that due diligence on how much space detention system would take if I combined all the detention. Because right now the sketch shows us separated, not touching theirs, having mine separated. But if it makes sense, after the rezoning, that to combine it, because it will allow me to get an extra building instead of paving a road and only building on one side. If I can get a second building on the other side, that might make sense. I don't know. So,
are you saying, when you say combine, are you talking combine the lots?
Well, the stormwater detention pond that's on there right now belongs to the parcels to the north.
Yeah, there's easements that go in there.
Right. And so we have to, again, just because I got an option on the property to buy it upon the rezoning and everything I told my engineer, design it without touching the pond, because I don't want you to spend all kinds of brain damage figuring out how much detention we're going to need if we take theirs and upgrade it to the current standards. So that's why we drew it like we did.
Gotcha.
But if we reconfigure it slightly, like maybe get rid of the building on the east end and wrap detention around there, and it allows us to put a couple more buildings on the south side of the road. This is a concept. I'm not saying it's 100% final, but I'm also not saying I'm going to be at 50 units. I mean, it might fluctuate a few units, but it's not going to go from 33 to 70. Maybe it's going to go from 33 to 40 or something like that.
Yeah, and to go back to what Bill was talking about and thinking when Danny was speaking, I don't believe it's a rezoning, a condition, even under a traditional rezoning, you can't put a condition or any sort of restrictions on it, because once you do that and say, okay, you are allowed 12 one-bedrooms per acre, we're going to rezone that to R3A, but you're only allowed to do 6. So now what you're doing is restricting the highest and best use of the property. So if the Planning Commission decides to make the recommendation to rezone this to the R3, the only restriction that's going to limit the amount of development on there is what's in the ordinance based on the ordinance standards right now. So, since that detention basin was put in, I don't know how long ago, Washtenaw County Drain Commission has significantly upped their standards. So he might even have less units in there. Who knows? But again, we can't place any condition beyond what he stated in there for the type of or the amount of units that he wants to put in. A little long-winded, but does that answer?
Chris, depending on what Dean Gearbach wanted to speak. Chris, if based on the numbers, and if we kept it at the 3A zoning, so somebody could potentially go in there and build a single building with a multiple number of units, correct? Based on the M3 zoning.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I think that's what I think Bill trying to understand as your proposal, that would be the concern, is that this could become any kind of M3 or R3A type development, and it could either be one single building or multiple buildings or whatever comply.
Yeah, but one single building, now you're going to be, if you're looking to maximize that, you're going to be restricted by the height at that point. So to these individual units with 3 or 4 dwellings in them, it's going to maximize the property a lot more in that event. But I see what you're getting at. So yeah, they could do one and limit the density, or they can do multiple and increase the density.
And then more setback issues and things come out of that too. So
side, you got your standard yard setbacks, but there's also setbacks from front, side, and rear of between the buildings. Those are additional. I think that I don't know off the top of my, I know side to side, I believe is 25 feet. I think on the, what Danny had submitted, it showed it. I'm trying to find
Yeah,
it.
it's 35 front side to back and 25 side to side.
Yeah, 75 front, rear, front, rear. It's, yeah, 50 feet, 20 feet. It's, so yeah, not only do you have your standard front side and rear yard setbacks, you also have facade or elevation setbacks per building.
And then also easements on this property, so it makes it a kind of a difficult property to develop. Yep.
There's no shortage of easements on here and encroachments and what have.
Any more questions? Okay, there is a motion to recommend, adopt, not adopt, a recommendation to the City Council for ordinance 821 of the commercial zoning amendment to change the zoning of 2 parcels totaling 6 acres from I2 industrial to R3 multiple family residential at 7181 North Maple, Saline, Michigan. Parcels 18, 12, 31, 210, 015, and 18, 12, 31, 210, 019. With the following conditions, and it's stated in the October letter from Danny Berry. Cheryl, would you make a motion?
I move to recommend to adopt.
Second.
And Carol, who seconded that?
I second.
Dan? Okay. Discussion, any more discussion?
Point of clarification, and this may be from Chris. The conditions in that letter, I thought we're only discussing the zoning. We can't attribute to anything else that's in that letter.
No, so you're correct. I would
remove that condition.
I would recommend amending the recommendation to approve the conditional zoning to the R3 with the condition that after 5 years, if if this hasn't started, because that's what Danny had presented.
Okay.
Is that all right with you, Cheryl and Dan?
Yes.
Yes.
And I think that's what I don't know if I suggested a recommendation, but that was the only one of all. Everything else was setbacks, variances for setbacks, but the one was to rezone it to R3, and if development hasn't begun in 5 years, the property will revert to I2.
So can we make those 2 items specific to this motion?
Yes, that'd probably be best.
And the other question I had was, was 3A, was to not keep it R3, but to make it R3A, if I need to make a formal amendment for that. Sounds like we need to make this a clarification on this motion, because that saying just the letter doesn't work.
R3.
I'd like to see it R3A. I'm making an amendment to make it an R3A, but also to make it specific on the 2 motion issues and not refer to the letter.
Yeah, how would you express that how would you verbalize that? Well, I guess you're not verbalizing it, but how would you express that in writing, Chris, within the motion?
Well, it's that's a good question. I haven't been faced with this one before, and I don't know if that's possible when it comes to a rezoning.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I don't think we can change their request.
Yeah.
Since Danny requested R3, it's either yay or nay on the R3. If we were to come back and do R3, if Danny was to come back and do R3A, then we would do that. But I think we have to consider the R3 conditional today.
That's, yeah, even though you're going from 18 units per acre to 12 units per acre, and you are kind of down zoning
we can't permit him to simply verbalize his desire to modify the classification?
You're not allowed to make any suggestions to amend his conditions as presented.
Aren't we just making a recommendation to city council?
Yes, that's all it is, a recommendation to city council to approve or deny as submitted.
Well, so I guess my follow-up question to Dan's then is, can city council would be under the same restriction though that planning commission is? We couldn't make modifications to his request, correct?
I don't have a good answer for you right now on that because I've never been faced with any sort of rezoning where a different type has been suggested. So I don't, now it comes into the complications or the questions being asked about if this has to be a new public hearing or anything like that because it is an amendment. I really don't have a good answer for you right now. And I think that would also be something that maybe
Can I ask you a
seeking
question?
the opinion of council would help.
This is Danny. Can I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead, Danny, I'm sorry.
The zoning difference of 3A and 3 is 12 units to 6 to 18. Is that the difference?
14 to 10.
14 to 10. Okay, so being that this is approximately 6 acres.
Oh, for 2 bedrooms, sorry.
Okay, so with this being 6 acres, the absolute maximum 2-bedroom number of units you can get in 3A would be 60, and in R3 would which one's less, 3 or 3A?
3A is less.
3A is.
Okay, so 3A would be 60, and R3 would be 84.
Correct.
Okay. Unless you put, and I'm telling you this as a builder, unless you put a high-rise, a 4 or 5-story structures on here, you would never be able to get even remotely close to those units. I mean, I have another product, not that I want to do here, but a product I did in Plymouth that it's a very condensed 2-story product that would yielded us 68 units on 5 acres. But the 5 acres was way more developable than this 6 acres. I bet you if I did that building here, I couldn't even get 45 units on it. And I don't think there's anything more densely compacted than that. And I understand the concern that, God forbid something happens to me, that's the only way. I'm not going to develop this. And you always have that remote chance. But just as a developer, you're not going to get anywhere near those 10 or 14 units per acre, unless you go high rise. And in that case, like Chris said, you're going to be touching the other restrictions that the city has, not just density, but your vertical restrictions as well.
So Chris, is there a new public notice for the council meeting?
For this one, no. Or for any recommendation to city council, no. There's this one. This is the public hearing for it.
Well, if we think that we can't change it, then I would support the motion as presented.
Okay. Any more questions, concerns?
I have one, Mr. Chairman. This is Mayor Marl. Mr. Green, I think it would be helpful because I can envision in the future more conditional zoning requests coming before this entity in the city to determine whether city council, I think we need to have a conversation with legal counsel and ask if city council can make modifications or changes to the specific request. And additionally, as a follow-up, between when the planning commission considers it and when city council considers it, can the applicant make any additions or changes to their request?
Yeah, I'll double check with our team.
Okay.
Just to clarify
Okay.
again, do we have the verbiage fixed for the motion regarding the conditions? Not the rezoning.
I'm going to rely on Mike and Katrina to put that verbiage in. Can you guys kind of help us with that? Instead of
Sure
just
can.
the
Yeah, I don't know if Katrina has it written down right now, but I know we'll get it fixed. So it covers 2 points you guys talked about.
Yeah, the 2 points. Yep, good. All right, there is a motion. It's been moved by Hess, seconded by Carol to recommend. All those in favor state by saying aye.
Oh, chair, for this one, I would recommend a roll call vote.
Yes, I'm sorry, Katrina. Yeah, can you do a roll call, Katrina? I'm sorry. Yeah.
You're good. Okay, Commissioner Beardsley,
No.
Commissioner Carroll,
Aye.
Councilmember Gearbaugh,
Aye.
Chief Hart,
Aye.
Commissioner Heff,
Aye.
Mayor Marl,
Aye.
Commissioner Troika,
Aye.
Commissioner Young,
No.
and Commissioner Fosdick.
Aye.
Okay, hold on. You have 7 ayes, 2 noes, and 0 absent.
All right, I believe the motion is passed.
Thank you, commissioners. I greatly appreciate it.
Good luck.
Thank you.
And Danny, we'll be in touch about next steps.
Perfect. Thank you, Mike.
Okay, new business. 2022 Planning Commission meeting dates. Did everybody take a look at that? And does anybody have any questions for that?
As long as it's not fall on
Okay.
a holiday, we're good.
All right. Let me look at my list here. Dean, will you move the approval of the Planning Commission meeting dates for next year? And Chief Hart, would you second that?
So moved?
Second.
I believe we need a roll call on that one too. So any discussion on that? Probably not. So Katrina, could you do a roll call on that?
Commissioner Beardsley,
Aye.
Commissioner Carroll,
Aye.
Councilmember Gearbaugh,
Aye.
Chief Hart,
Aye.
Commissioner Heff,
Aye.
Mayor Marl,
Aye.
Commissioner Troika,
Aye.
Commissioner Young,
Aye.
and Commissioner Fosdick.
Aye.
You have 9 ayes, 0 no, and 0 absent.
Motion is carried. All right, discussion items. Bill, do you want to start us off?
Sure. I'll start with the performance or surety bond topic, and I know Mayor Marl has maybe more information than I do, but it's come up a few times over the years as to when we have a project, what assurances do we have that the project will be completed? And we certainly can look around town and see why that's so important. And, for those of you that aren't really familiar with it, you can get a performance, you can get a bond. There's basically 4 different kinds of bonds that a contractor can purchase through an insurance agent. And the one that I'm talking about relates to a performance bond, which is a guarantee, if you will, on the part of an insurance company that a project's going to be completed. And it is purchased by a contractor for the project owner as the beneficiary. I think there's some legal counsel on this commission that probably could do a better job explaining it than I just did. But so I don't think we're talking about the city being able to get a bond to ensure that project gets completed. But I was just wondering whether or not a city could require, as part of the approval process for the project owner, that the owner require that their contractor gets a performance bond. So there's a contractual agreement between the contractor and the owner to complete that project. And if they don't do it, the insurance company does it. So I just wanted to tee that up. It's not an easy fix. It's probably something that takes a lot of consideration. With that, I'll yield to Mr. Mayor, who who I think can shed some more light on it.
Thanks, Bill, and I appreciate the email earlier. This is an important and timely matter. So let me take a step back. Most of you are aware of this, but in July, actually at our first city council meeting in July, city council established a risk mitigation working group that's comprised of 2 council members, 3 private citizens, and actually a 4th private citizen who has 3 decades of high-level risk mitigation expertise working with large nonprofits and Fortune 500 companies. And evidently she offered her services to us pro bono. And our colleague, our planning commission colleague, Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh, is actually chairing that initiative. So when I conclude my remarks, if there's anything that he would like to add, I'd be delighted to yield the floor. Suffice it to say, in layman's terms, the group is looking at every operation and division of city government to reduce risk and liability. And I know that stalled or failed developments have been discussed. As a matter of fact, I discussed that as part of my interview with the team actually last Friday. So it is something that I know the risk mitigation working group is going to be looking at and considering. They are charged with making a final recommendation and issuing a comprehensive report to City Council no later than the first quarter of 2021. And from my most recent conversation with Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh, I suspect we'll probably have something for Council to digest in March of next year. I do think either extending lines of credit, surety bonds, or performance bonds will be something that is looked at by legal counsel, by staff, and probably ultimately by the code review task force as well. I do think that the city needs some additional leverage or an additional tool in our tool belt. You know, bonding for developments has sort of a mixed record. It's certainly not a silver bullet, but it is something that we should consider and probably adopt. I will note, however, that I want to be very cautious and strategic about whatever we do, because we are a municipality in Washtenaw County. And this is a county that has a high level of taxation and a rather high regulatory burden. And so while we do need additional tools to prevent failed installed projects, we do want to be cognizant of the hardship, the inherent hardship that's already placed on the private sector. So just something to consider. Mr. Gearbaugh, I know you and I have talked about this matter a number of times over the past couple months. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that really came out of it is this concern of these projects. And just like you said, Bill, how do you actually achieve it? And it depends on the project. In some cases, like say a Fairdean project, it's not even started. But now in the case of the hotel, it's started. How do you finish it? And when we started looking at some of those issues, it does begin that cost factor that gets into it. So what do we establish as being a reasonable surety amount to either complete a project or to at least get it stabilized so that it could be turned over to someone else? And then of course you get into the problem with who owns the land and all of that. But I agree there is something, and I'm hoping that there's input maybe from individuals here that have gone through building and constructing that can help us provide that kind of advice to go forward. Because we were even looking at an example of the hotel, and you know, it would have been upwards of $1 million just for the surety bond itself to complete a $20 million project. So then you start to say they were hurting from already in terms of their financing. Would it have killed the project? And there's where we have to start determining the risk. I think there needs to be more upfront review done by planning or done by the developers in terms of maybe changing how we look at proposals and so forth. And that may be one of the recommendations, is that we need to have more assurity that the financing is there and the plans and what's going on, versus just saying, okay, we understand this and allowing it to occur. Unfortunately, the city was involved in a couple of these, and it becomes more of an issue. I think in the past, it's become more of an issue with the city's involvement, and maybe going forward, as more private development occurs, it's really getting to figure out how does the market handle it versus us trying to step in and complete it. Because as you know, we're still struggling even with the car wash, trying to figure that one out and how to figure out how to prevent that. So there is a lot of work I think we need to do. And if anybody has advice, that's what we need to go forward and look at.
Dean, are we getting a legal opinion on whether we can even actually require a performance bond for a completion of an entire private project?
Yeah, that's where it hangs out. It's like, how can you do that? I know you can, you can put some sureties, and Mike can probably address it, but there's certain things that we can do to require sidewalks and parking lots and roads and things done.
That's
Whether you
normal.
can get a whole building done, I don't know anybody that would be able to even afford the kind of surety bond to come.
I don't think you can. I think that it would be nice to have it in the case of the hotel. And I'm not talking about that in any details because my firm's tied into it. But I've never seen that done. And I don't think it would work in practice. It would be cost prohibitive. And let's say that we had it right now. Who's going to come in and do the work? I mean, we'd be essentially a project manager at that point, which is not really what cities are equipped to do.
Yeah, I think in that particular case, in most cases, you're only protecting the project owner, right? I mean, we're the byproduct of that protection. So it protects the project owner from the contractor. And so I don't know enough about the hotel and what went wrong there. But if the problem was with the contractor, then a hotel would be done by now. But if the problem was with the funding of the contractor by the owner, bond's not going to help you too much there. So, so it is that sort of difficult to get through, I think, and that's why I thought I'd just raise it and see if we could do anything.
It is being evaluated, Bill.
Great. Great.
And I know that there will be more discussions in the future, which leads me to a real quick question for Mr. Gearbaugh, if I may, on the broader topic of risk mitigation and reducing liability. Was there going to be an opportunity for planning commissioners to chime in and provide insights to Ms. Champion or any of your other associates on the risk mitigation working group?
Yes. Part of the thing is we've been going through staff and we've gone through the council. Then we're looking at some of the commissions which have a clear indication of where their concerns are. And I think planning is one of them. So we're hoping to have some type of situation like that. So you'll get your chance to help us understand where your concerns are.
Not just limited to bonding, but any aspect of our municipal portfolio.
Correct. Of any kind of development, any kind of issues associated with planning, and any other issues that may come about.
Just have a quick question. Obviously, I do heavy highway work, and on every one of our projects, we require performance bonds. So the fact that they're not required just kind of baffles me. Is there any way to escrow bids that would still be being a project manager for a project, for private development, to ensure that a project gets completed? I mean, we've had to do that on many projects, but again, that's with public funding and in the heavy highway development. So I don't know enough about it, but it's just something that they do in New Jersey. So I figured I'd ask.
Interim Manager Green, do you want to maybe address that concern and also talk about what we do internally to ensure that work that's being done for the municipality is done on time and done appropriately?
Yeah, so for city projects ourselves, we do require bonds from whatever contractor we get. So we know our work's gonna get done no matter what. As for builders and things like that, we do require performance bonds, but as the mayor and I think Dean mentioned, it's only for the smaller aspects of a project. So if something's going on, we need to make sure the landscaping, the sidewalks and things like that are done so the property is at least safe. But as for getting, I think Mr. Troika nailed it, where I think it's going to be very tough to try to make a requirement for private developers to get these type of bonds. And we'll talk with our legal counsel, see if they come up with something that we don't think of. But it's going to be a hill that's going to be difficult. But if there's a way to do it, it may be worth it.
Okay, thank you. Number 2, medical marijuana. Bill, you want to give us an update on that?
Certainly. Much more exciting topic. The Code Review Task Force, and for those of you that don't recall, it's sort of a small group that works with council and city management staff to review either current and outdated ordinances or proposed new ordinances and sort of do some early massaging of those with citizen feedback before it gets to council. And medical marijuana is something we've been working on for a few months now. And there are roles for the the planning commission in this process. And so my purpose today is just sort of cover what we think those roles may be and ask for your input on what you think you want your role to be. So let's begin with, real briefly, the 5 different kinds of licenses covered under medical marijuana. It starts with a grower, which is what you would expect, sort of a growing operation, a processor, which is sort of a food processor, if you will, if you think about it. It's a plant, you're processing the actual plant, a transporter to move it around, a provisioning center, which is basically the retail store, and a safety compliance facility, which is essentially a laboratory that tests the THC component of the product to make sure it's within the appropriate levels. So you've got those 5 different licenses, and each of those, if the city decides to move forward with all 5, every city gets the opportunity to say where they would allow those specific licenses to operate from. So if you're a safety compliance facility or a laboratory, you're probably thinking you're lining that use up to a scientific research or laboratory industrial kind of zoning, if you will. It gets a lot more sensitive when you're talking about provisioning centers, because that's the retail store. Do you want them downtown? Do you want them in retail plazas? Do you want them in industrial parks, commercial zonings, et cetera? So this commission, I believe, is going to be charged with sort of approving the actual zoning for these different licenses if it moves forward. And I think where Assistant Manager Green and I left it from the code review team today was that there'd be some sort of straw man suggestions developed to get the ball rolling in terms of what might be possible for the 5 different license types. And then I think we have to outline when it comes to Planning Commission. So I'm going to sort of let us all talk about that as well. But the second piece of it that we could use some input on is, let's use, for example, the processor. So this is the processing of the plant. And let's say that you say, we think this is going to be restricted only to industrial sites. And then somebody comes in to proceed with an application for a processing license, and they're going to locate in an industrially zoned area. The question of the Planning Commission is, do you want to see that application and approve it as a special land use, or having already determined that industrial zoning is appropriate for processing, does the Planning Commission no longer need to see that specific application? So those are the 2 things that I think Planning Commission is going to get involved with, is mapping the license to the zoning, and secondly, identifying how much the Planning Commission is going to be involved in a specific application. And that wouldn't have to be the same involvement for every one of these licenses. You could, for example, say, we want a special land use for the provisioning center, but we'll allow the use by right in these other licenses, or whatever you wanted to do. So, Mr. Green, did you want to add anything more to the discussion, or maybe facilitate a little bit of feedback here?
Yeah, I think you covered most of it. And so our next steps, at least once we get feedback from you, is Tom and I, we're going to take your guys' feedback and what our opinion is, and we're going to kind of mold these uses for medical marijuana into our current zoning ordinance, and then take that code review task force and go from there. So if you guys have any feedback that you want to give us right now, we'll take it. We'll see what we can do with it. But then naturally, like the regulatory side of it, we're still at the very beginning, so we expect to go over this for a couple more months at least before it comes to you guys for formal recommendation. But we're just looking to get started on it. Anyone got questions?
Bill,
I see you're thinking.
Bill, this is just for my clarification. This is just for medical, right?
This is just for medical. They will tell you that medical is the first step towards recreational. So you do need to be careful where you put these businesses, because there may be, it may be a pathway to the next step. So they do recommend sort of thinking of this in a multi-step process. Just FYI.
No, that's helpful because from my perspective, I would say outside of industrial zoning, and that this is just my opinion, I'd be very hesitant to have any kind of review not or granted an automatic by right because I think there's going to be significant public input requested when those kind of requests become apparent. So I don't want to add more red tape than we need to, but just knowing what the public and how it is, hopefully at some point the feds are going to deal with this because I just saw that about the congressional aspect that they're looking at it again to eliminate some of this. But for me, I think it's understanding that industrial is different, so much different than the other ones, that I would rather have special use requests happen in those other zoning options.
Yeah, Bill, if I may very briefly, because I obviously as mayor, I convened a medical marijuana working group and served on that board along with Chief Hart and several others as an ex officio. And from my own research, a grow operation, testing, requires significant space. And a lot of those facilities are in industrial research parks. And if you're not, specifically familiar with the operation, it looks like, Jack Products or American Soy. It's fairly innocuous in terms of its impact to the community. Similar to Mr. Gearbaugh, I think the more nefarious activities could transpire at a retail establishment, at a distributor. So I do think some additional regulations and review for dispensaries would be appropriate. But my opinion, which reflects the overwhelming majority of the community, is that the voters in the Saline community have acted twice on both recreational and medical marijuana. And while I did not support either one of those proposals, the results were clear and unambiguous. And the community wants to permit these types of enterprises in Saline.
I'll just say that one of my deep concerns is our water resource, because it could take up to 6 gallons of water per day per plant for these grow facilities. That's an incredible amount of water that we would have to supply, and do we have the infrastructure to deal with a grow facility? So just some things to keep in mind is these are not environmentally friendly businesses for the most part, at least the growing and the processing facilities. So as lucrative as they may be, I think a lot of steps that we as a community have taken to be more sustainable and friendly to the environment, this is almost a step backwards for those efforts.
Although I would say, Chief, I think the real desire in Saline is to have a distribution center. I'm not sure we have I'm not sure within the industrial park that we have either the facilities or the footprint to accommodate a successful, viable grow or processing enterprise. But it's
I would agree with that, and I just hearken back to one of the presentations that the gentleman did for us. I think they were from Marshall, and just the incredible amount of water there. So I do think that you're right, Mayor, that most people are looking for that provision center type of a business. And public comment that a lot of people want this to be in our downtown.
That's all I had.
My concern with distribution centers is you've just added another building. It might as well just be another, security risk and so forth. And I just hope we have, personnel to kind of know what's going on there. That's my concern with distribution. The industrial park would be fine, but I have a whole bunch of problems with the whole thing coming to Saline, and I guess we'll deal with it as it's approached.
Yeah, I think that was originally my concern, obviously, from a law enforcement perspective. And when I reached out to my colleagues that have provision centers, I was surprised to find that there were very few problems outside or at those facilities. I think there was one incident in Ypsilanti. There was recently one up in Ann Arbor. But for the most part, a lot of those fears, at least now, have not come to fruition yet.
I live down, just chime in.
Thank you.
I live in Adrian, and there's all sorts of, I mean, there's a massive grow operation, and I can think within a quarter-mile area on one street, there are 4 provisioning centers. One of them is kind of shoddy. They did just a half-assed job on it. The other 3 were new builds. One was a rehab actually, and they did a very nice job on them. And between those and the massive grow operation, those are the least invasive around here. You drive by that grow op, it's probably 500 to 700 feet off the road, and I don't know what type of filtration system they have in there, but you can still smell it, and it's pretty. It's a nuisance, for anybody that lives in that area. But just speaking as someone who lives in a community with the provision centers, those are the least invasive. I don't know of any issues that come up with them, and with design standards, you can get those things to blend in just as well as any other building, and they don't. I don't smell anything driving by those, but that's just my 2 cents. You can also, and I believe since from the zoning standpoint, you might be able to, you can only can't have one within 1,000 feet of another or something like that. I don't know if that can be allowed because it is, the state did leave this up to each community to write their, to write an ordinance for it. So you might be able to limit them by that standard alone too. How many are going to be in the city, or just even by licenses.
We've actually talked about that co-review task force. We do have a couple buffers in mind that we're going to include. Naturally, it's 1,000 feet from schools. We have a couple other that if we do allow provisioning centers, that no more, one can't be within 250 feet of another, just so they're spread out a little bit. So we've been starting to discuss these type of things, but naturally that's why we're here talking to you guys, just so we give you a basic idea of what we're looking for the zoning ordinance in the future, because eventually it's going to come to you, and seeing if you had any ideas off the top of your heads that you want. So as of right now, the biggest thing I'll work with, Tom, it's any use that's outside of the I-2. We'll start with this. Any use outside the I-2, we'll label it as a special land use, and then we'll adjust from there. If that sounds good with anyone, or if anyone has any other comments.
Yeah, I
Sounds
agree.
good, Mike. Good.
So Mike, what do we have in terms of zoning within the downtown district with regards to any medical operations?
It's something we talked about a little bit. The 1,000 feet from the schools is going to be a complication for downtown, because I'm going to have to end up working with Chris and getting like a good map of buffer zones, because our general idea is we're going to map it or make the distance regulations to like the MLCC. So it's 1,000 feet following roads. If you do just point A to point B, most of downtown is knocked out due to Henny Field. That's the other thing we have to confirm. It's since Henny Field's owned by the school, does that count, or is it the property that's owned by the school has to be used for instruction? That counts as that 1,000 feet rule. So we're still working on those tweaks. But if Henny Field counts, a lot of downtown's getting knocked out right away. So,
But can we identify, say if we wanted to identify the overlay district as not being able to have, can we do such a thing?
yeah, yep.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why me and Tom just figured we start just very basic. We'll take the closest resemblance to these uses, try to match categories, and then go from there. So at the end of the day, you realize we don't want anything in the D1, D2 district. We just cut everything out of that.
How about relationship or distance to houses of worship, churches?
They've briefly talked about that. From what we see, there's no law that says it has to be far away from that. And so Code Review Task Force may or may not put a buffer on that. They briefly talked about it, but most likely
probably not. There, it was discussed, and there just wasn't a lot of enthusiasm or maybe concern about it, quite frankly.
I can't remember what our community members had to say about that on the survey, because I think that was one of the questions about how close to churches, but I guess I'll have to go back and look at it.
And there's
if I recall correctly, Chief, I think they were less enthusiastic, but if I recall from those surveys, they were pretty much enthusiastic about everything.
Yeah.
And naturally, there's other regulations you could put in place, such as they have to be closed on Sundays or something like that. So if you are concerned about it, you can always make it where the busiest day for the church is these places are closed. So we got a lot of wiggle room going forward, but we're just starting out, so we just want to get this base under us, and we'll go from there.
All right, thank you, Mike. Any other questions for Mike? For Bill, anything? Okay,
No,
there's no.
I'm all good.
All right,
Mr.
there's
Chairman,
no
I've got one thing real quick. This just
Go ahead,
annoys
Brian.
me. This just annoys me. Can we make sure, Katrina and Mike, that the citizen comment verbiage for this meeting and every other meeting should reflect our standards, which is people have 3 minutes. The way this is worded right now, unless this body established some additional guidelines, somebody could stand up or speak for 5-10 minutes. All the public comment period should say you have 3 minutes.
Oh, we'll make sure that's put in there.
Very good. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you.
You don't want to filibuster?
No.
We already have enough of those. No comments.
All right, Dan Strika, would you move that the meeting is adjourned at 8:32? And Ms. Young, would you second that?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, state by saying aye.
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 Motion's passed. Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you.
Oh,
Bye.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good holiday.
Good holiday.
You too.
You too.